With its ups and downs, it's time to leave 2023 behind and look ahead to the new year. Recently, Mayor Mike Savage sat down to talk about the year that was and what's in store for HRM in 2024. First, a look back at 2023.
So I think, our investments in climate change initiatives paid off this year. Obviously, we had incredible climate catastrophes, the worst fires in our history, the worst floods in our history, winter in the fall. We've kind of moved to being a four-season disaster city now, and that's not all bad. But we used to have the fall and winter. We now had the worst fires in our history in the spring and the worst floods in summer. And I think that's the way of the world. So I think it validates a lot of the investments we've been making, including our Halifax plan and the climate action tax, that we have to do some of these things. So I think that that's important. I think we've made some strides on the affordable housing. The relationship with the province has been better. The new Minister of Community Services is a pretty easy guy to work with. Our staffs work very well. We're hoping to have some more good news in the short term on homelessness, which is kind of the issue that sits in my head a lot of the time, our fellow citizens who have no place to live. So I think that's good. Growth is a good thing. We just have to manage it. And when I go back to when I became mayor and the Chamber of Commerce came to me and said, our goal is by 2018, we want to be a top 3 growth city in Canada. Well, we achieved that by 2016, and we're still growing at a phenomenal rate, both from immigration and also from interprovincial transfers. So people are seeing things here in the city they want. We celebrated an amazing World Juniors last year. We had the great East Coast Music Awards. We had a good summer for tourism. We continue to be an innovation and tech hub. Companies are coming to this city that would have only been imagined a decade ago. So there's a lot of good things, and we're investing in the community, and that's what we should do.
Any regrets from 2023?
Look, we don't, in terms of the relationship with the province, we don't like some of the legislation. As I've said, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's based on false premises. But our job is not to argue with other orders of government, it's to work with them. And people get very frustrated when they see governments not working together. But, that's a challenge, because I didn't think it was a wise piece of legislation. But as I said, the relationship with the Department of Community Services has been pretty strong the last little while, including with Carla McFarland, who was the previous minister, who was pretty easy to deal with as well, very empathetic as well. So I guess that would be, and then just the fact of we're really seeing the impacts of climate change in our community. And as a coastal community, I think it's exacerbated. But to think that you have the worst fires ever and the worst floods ever, and you're never going to see something like that again, is just wrong-headed and not recognizing the impacts of a changing climate. So that obviously was a challenge for this year.
Savage talked about lessons learned from the 2023 weather disasters.
Well, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So, if we didn't learn something, it would be our fault. We knew that we had some issues, from development from years and years ago that would not be approved today. So we've already learned how to manage growth a lot better. And there is opportunities for growth throughout the municipality, but we need to make sure that it's planned and managed, and that some of it is paid for by, the development community. And also we need to work with the province. A lot of this development is in areas of provincial jurisdiction from a roads point of view. And I think we've learned over the number of years that if you're building communities, it's easy for a developer to come and to say to the city, we'll put the roads in, we don't need transit, we don't need rec, we don't need libraries, we don't need any of that. But the people who live there want those things. So we're retroactively fixing these problems of development that was probably unwise. And in terms of, I think we had already identified egress from communities in our public safety plan as an issue that we have to deal with, as do all communities in Nova Scotia and probably all communities across the country. Our fire guys have learned a lot, performed incredibly well during the fires and the floods. And in spite of some tensions, the RCMP and the police work together in that as well. We have a very good EOC. We've recognized that we're going to need to invest in our emergency operations team. So Erica Fleck is Wonder Woman. But we need more support on that because we're going to be seeing more calls on that. So, there's a number of things that you learn. And also, our fire department is largely a structure fire department. This wildfire, interface between, sort of the wilderness areas and the urban and suburban areas is something that our guys are working on, and we'll have to continue to do that.
How Halifax deals with growth will continue in 2024.
Well, I expect continued growth. People still like to come to Halifax. We need that. And the challenges that come with that, making sure that there's housing, making sure that we're investing in infrastructure. So that would be roads, water, wastewater, but also, green spaces. So people, they want to live in an area. So there's a few things people want when they move into a new home or a new multi-unit residential building. One thing, when they turn the tap on, they'd like water to come out. So that's a big deal. But they also want some area for their kids to play. And some of the things that we've kind of downsized in the urban core, like schools even, grocery stores, those sort of things, we all need to work together to make sure that those things are in place when people need them. So growth is a big piece going forward, continuing to invest in the impacts of climate change. The mobility issue is huge. We're hoping to announce in the short term that we have an arrangement with the federal and provincial governments to fund, the ferry system from the Bedford area and areas around there into the city, which is really important, bus rapid transit. We have to find better ways to move people throughout the municipality, I think is a very important piece. One of our priorities is strong communities. What does that mean? Well, that means communities where people actually live and work and play and shop together in their communities as much as possible with the support they need, active transportation, bike trails, all the things that we need to be a modern urban city. So that will certainly continue in the new year. That's a very important part of what we see coming down the pike at us. So the challenge of growth is that when people move to Nova Scotia, they don't necessarily start paying property tax right away. There's a delay in property tax. We have a capped property tax system. But they do start paying income tax right away. They do start paying sales tax. They do start paying corporate tax and other taxes. And so a lot of the benefits of growth go to the province. We've seen large unbudgeted expenditures from the province. Not commenting on whether that's good or bad. It's just that they have the money to do that, where we're the engine of growth for Nova Scotia, but we're not seeing that kind of revenue increase. So working with the province will be an important part of next year as well.
Halifax is expected to reach the 500,000 population milestone. Is that an important one?
No, it's not. I mean, look, no, this is, I've always wanted growth. When I became mayor, we didn't have any. We do now. I think it's a good thing. We need to manage it. We need to plan for it. We need to build for it. 500,000 in itself, I suppose in some ways it's a significant number. I don't exactly know what the population was when I became mayor. Certainly a lot closer to 400,000, probably 410,000 or something. But what it does signify is that people are coming here because they like something here, but they're also coming here and they expect the infrastructure to keep pace. And so if we're going to have a larger population, we need better transit. We need active transportation. We need water and wastewater. We need green spaces for kids to play. We need to protect wilderness areas so that people have a place to go. All those things are more and more important, I think, as the population increases because the demands are greater.
The municipal election is in October, and Savage said he will announce if he's running early this year.
Yeah, I love being the mayor of the city. In many ways, it's the job that suits me best of any I've ever had. But, I have to come to terms, is this the right thing for me, for my family, and for the city? And, I give that a fair bit of thought, but I've always kind of said, I'll make a decision, when it's appropriate. The campaign doesn't officially start till September 15th. You can't start raising money till March or April. This is not like running for president of the United States. We don't have primary systems. So I think people want to know what I'm doing. And, people have been very encouraging of me that I talk to run again. But I have to make sure that it settles for me comfortably in my head and my heart. And that's not just my own view, but what is the best life cycle for a mayor? And Peter Kelly had 12 years. Lawrence Mawhinney in Lunenburg had 40 years. Hazel McCanyon had whatever she had. So, but I'll make that decision early in the new year.
Savage said the big issues in the next election will involve housing, transportation, and climate change.
I think it'll revolve around housing. It's a funny thing, affordable housing was not something that we talked about in the municipality when I got elected. In fact, the first council meeting after I was elected in 2012, we just had a blue sky session. What are the issues of the term? And folks like myself, Wayne Mason, who was new, Jen Watts, who was in her second term, talked about housing, and other councillors kind of said, hey, time out, that's not our gig, that's the provincial gig. We do zoning, planning, and all that sort of stuff, but we don't build housing. So, but it very much, to think you can run a city, govern a city as a team of councillors without addressing housing, both supply of housing across the board, and more particularly now, affordable housing, it's just unrealistic. It is a big part of the city, and so that's a big issue. I think transportation will continue to be an issue. I expect that in the next municipal election, the issue of climate change will be very significant, and you will have folks who support action on climate change, and you will also have people who will say, it's not the time to do it. I'm in the former camp. I think we have to address climate change, and the investments we make now will pay off big time. But I think that'll be a big issue when the election happens in 8, 10, whatever it is, months, 10 months.
Could council achieve gender parity again?
There's no reason it couldn't be done again. People will make that decision. I think it's important to have the population represented as much as possible. Not only did we have half women, half men, we had 2 African Nova Scotian councillors, one of whom is not running again in the next election, which is sad because Lindell has been a good councillor, a different councillor, somebody who I really enjoy the relationship I have with him, but he's made that decision. But I think as much as possible. But people make their decision, and you could have a council that's largely female, but doesn't really make decisions that a lot of women would say were in their best interest. It all depends on the individual. On balance, I would like to have a high percentage of female councillors because, the population is split, and I think people like to see themselves in their councillors.
The mayor also talked about the homeless encampment in front of City Hall and others throughout HRM.
Every mayor I talk to shares this view that this is the issue that sits the most heavily in our heart, and it's tough. It's not as tough as it is for somebody who has no place to go home to, but I do go out quite often to this encampment and other encampments. First of all, I think it's important that people in the city see encampments. Like, we shouldn't just hide them away so people think it's not a problem. Out of sight, out of mind, so to speak. People need to understand that there are folks in our community who need help to have a place to live. And yes, it's people who have mental health and addictions issues, but it's also people who have jobs and can't afford a place to live. It's veterans, it's parents, it's kids. There's a lot of people who can't afford a place to live, and so we have to deal with that. And I don't know that any place in Canada has figured it all out. Again, I'll say that the relationship that our staff at the city, which we didn't have people working in homelessness 2 years ago. We didn't have anybody in that. That wasn't our gig. We now have a number of people, including Max Chauvin, who's done amazing work, almost like a missionary. And he works well with the Department of Community Services. We had a meeting this morning with the 2 staffs talking about this issue. And as I say, the minister, Trevor Boudreau, I would say has been very helpful and is really trying to make a big difference and is, I believe, getting extra resources for it. As long as I've been in public life, which will be coming up on 20 years next year, poverty and homelessness have been a big issue. When I was a Liberal MP, I was the human resources critic, including for poverty and homelessness. And as mayor, when I get elected, that's one of the things I talked about. We started an anti-poverty plan with the United Way, which is reported back. We started a housing and homelessness partnership in the city. So it's always been something that matters to it it very much bothers me and weighs heavily on me that we can't completely figure this out. And all you can do is say, is there somebody who could do better? And the most important thing is that we not lose sight of the forest for the trees. We have to work with our partners. So the province have done some really good things, need more, but they've done some really good things. The federal government has had things like the Rapid Housing Initiative, which is housing 180 people in this community. So those are significant, but the need's not going away anytime soon. And it's been said that you can judge a society on the way that it treats the most vulnerable people in it. I think it's important people understand, as I ramble on a bit, it's important for people to understand that people aren't homeless by choice. And then when you're dealing with it, there's sort of gradations, right? So I want everybody to be inside. If they can't be inside, you know what? These little red tents are better than the tents that were there before. I don't want people freezing to death in our city, and I don't want people burning in our city. And so, we have to put everything into it to fix the problem.
He said people just want to help, but he is worried about a growing divide between the housed and homeless.
So I think most people in our community are big-hearted people who want to help. People who live in an area where there's an encampment can be very empathetic and open-minded and still not like seeing syringes on their lawn or their kids having to wade through feces or hearing, homophobic slurs or things like that. And my biggest fear with homelessness is that it is driving a wedge between the housed and the unhoused. But in this community, from what I hear from people, most people want to help those who are homeless. And that's certainly the view I take, that I think most people want to do the right thing. The people who live by Mar Park were good people, right? And a lot of them were supporting the campers in Mar Park, but they still have to live their life in that community. It's the same in Geary Street in Dartmouth. It's the same for the people near Victoria Park. It's the same here at Grand Parade. The folks who are homeless are not bad people. They're not evil people. They don't mean ill. We've had events in Grand Parade since the tents have been up in full measure, and those events go on without interruption. These folks are not out to disrupt people's lives. I mean, there are some isolated instances, of course. So, for me, the background I come from, my parents was that we all have an obligation to help each other. And I think most people feel that way.
Savage said there's lots to look forward to, including the Junos in March. He's also optimistic about the city's sports teams.
I went to the Junos in Edmonton last year and took the handoff. And Edmonton was a great host. But it was 30 below. And, they don't do a lot of things outside in the winter. There's a lot of homeless downtown Edmonton. So I think you'll see the streets come alive for the Junos. It'll be exciting. I think the Mooseheads are going to win the Memorial Cup. I think the Thunderbirds are going to win a championship here. I think the Wanderers are going to win the CPL. I think our university teams are going to do great. We have a lot of stuff going on in the city that's really positive. We just have to use the momentum of growth to be more inclusive and more sustainable. That's why I'm so proud of the Halifax Partnership and HRM's economic plan, which is called People, Planet, Prosperity. I can't echo that enough. Take care of the people, honor the planet, and prosperity follows. I believe that in my heart.
In Halifax, I'm Jen Taplin for SaltWire.